Hey friends, welcome back. You are watching day 7 of our 13 Days of Halloween series here at Polly's Paper Studio. If you're just joining in, you can follow the links in the top of the description for the first 6 days so you can get caught up. And so for today's project, we're going to be working with our offcuts. Now, by the time we get to day 7, you can imagine we have created a fair bit of scraps as we're working along. And so I want to put those to good use today by combining them and creating some very sweet A2 size cards. I'm also going to be using some of my standard size dies as well as a couple of Christmas dies and some really fun letter dies as well as my new coneflower. And so I'm pretty excited about this because you all know, if you're following me for a while, that clean and simple is a style I strive to be good at, and I fail usually every time, but I think that sweet and simple is my answer to that. And so I'm just going to be creating cards with less layering, less bulky embellishments, and trying to utilize the pattern and layering them up in fun different ways so that we can get through some of our stash. So stick with me and we will make these together. So we're going to go back to that I Love Halloween collection for projects today, and this is an Echo Park collection. This is the 12 by 12 paper pack, and I wanted to make sure to utilize the scraps, so I decided I wasn't going to cut into any of the full sheets of the 12 by 12 pattern papers here, and that way I could get through more of my offcut. So I did decide that the A2 size format was going to be perfect for this, and I did break my rule about the no new sheets of paper only for the inside because I wanted to make sure that I had a full size of that pattern to cover the background. And so I just put a nice little border on that, and then I added an area for sentiment to be added because that's pretty busy pattern paper. Okay, so for my first card, you all will be very proud of me. I have left some cardstock without pattern paper layered on top. Now I did stamp, but I think that shows a lot of progress. I'm still not in the clean and simple category, but much less layering. And so I picked this sheet of pretty charcoal gray, and I don't know how well that shows up, but I did stamp on the side so I'd have a little printing. This is just kind of a scripty font text, and so I added that with some black ink, and so there's a little bit of pattern there, and that will be helping me to fill up that background just a little bit. I cut this piece as I would normally for my cardstock layer, and then I would typically put pattern paper over top, but this is going to be the full base for my card today. Now I have used a circle die that had a nesting set, so I had some larger ones and smaller ones, and I picked 2 different of the sets, make kind of a frame out of that pattern paper, and I picked this pattern because it was a little bit smaller, and so you can still see what that design is all about. And then I also cut a just white cardstock circle because this background is very dark, so I wanted to lighten it up a little, and I'm going to offset that because I did make a little flower arrangement, and so I need to leave room for that. Because this circle is going to be hard to get that tape on, I'm just going to adhere this with a little bit of Tombow and center this into that larger circle die cut. So now we have a frame built up, and I'm going to incorporate some die cut letters, but first I want to give them a base to land on. I've just taken a stitched banner shape, and so that's going to go down first. And so here is my first letter. I'm going to work backwards so I don't run out of room because that happens to me all the time. And then my second letter, I'm just lining that up right along that banner shape. And then I'll add my B. These letters were cut from a Whimsy Stamps die set. Okay, so I've created a flat arrangement with some of my flower dies, and then the leaves here are a combination of stamped and then also just regular die cut leaves, and this is going to wrap around that corner. And I'm just adding this right here. Then two last details are some small stars cut from silvery glitter paper. I'm going to kind of build on that angle that we've created with our foliage. So one's going to go up here, and then another one's going to go down here. So this is going to be it for my first Halloween Sweet and Simple card. I'm actually quite happy without all the extra paper layers because the focal points really pop on this card against that dark background. So that's card number one. So for card number two, I'm going to utilize my die from Christmas. And so I'm going to cut it from black cardstock and create a little scene with these layered with some hillside borders here that are stitched. So I'm going to get a little bit of extra detail. And then I also have a larger piece of that plaid paper left over, and I'm going to use it as a all over pattern, but I cut out the circle, and that's going to be the frame for my little scene inside. So I cut the full strip, and then I cut them into portions so that I could add two different layers. And it just so happened to be basically the same contour for that hillside. So I thought that was pretty lucky. And I'm gonna use a charcoal gray so that it will have a nice contrast with the black. And so my next layer would have been here, and I just clipped that off. I'm going to stagger these so that the houses and the trees don't line up perfectly, so that it looks more like a little haunted village that would be on a hillside. And so here's the other piece of this side, and I'm going to flip it over and then rejoin it back to my scene. Okay, so I've got all the elements of my little haunted village put together, and it will be easier to position this if I just attach it to my frame, and I've already put a layer of that thick foam adhesive on there, and I can just center this so that all of those cut edges are disguised on the other side of the circle cutout frame. And so here is my little village, and I can add this to my card base now. The first thing I did was I attempted to stamp a sentiment, but there wasn't any room for it, so I just turned it over, and I can add this to the base. And so this is a slightly lighter gray color, so that there will be a definitely noticeable difference between that and the hillside. And then I gave it a border of that black cardstock just as a nice finishing detail, and you won't see most of this gray, only inside that circle frame. So I'll just pull the excess tape here. I think this is a really good way to stretch your dies, and even though they seem light, they do tend to build up and take up a lot of room, and they are not inexpensive, so they're an investment. And so if you can get multiple uses out of each one, then that would be much better value for your money. Now you can see I've got my cute little frame and the haunted village inside. I want to finish that with a couple of extra details, and I found this one literally on my desk from another project. This is actually a whole different collection, but it's just a good way to use up things that are laying around, and you can combine them to make different projects. And this was actually a manufacturing strip from a Simple Stories collection. So I thought this was a cute little sentiment, and I like that background to be dark with the white lettering because it sort of matched the theme. And so here is one of the stickers from the sticker sheet that went with this collection. And I know I tend to leave my stickers behind, but I really liked this particular one because I wanted to add a floral but without having dimension. And so what I did was I pulled it off of the 12 by 12 sheet, added it to some printer paper, and then cut it back out and put some spacers behind it so that I could move my arrangement around until I got it to where everyone was being friends. And then I made sure to support any portion of it that would be falling into that frame. So I'm just going to have a look at where all of these pieces are falling, and then I can position these so that the sticker will disguise the cut edge of that paper. This is pretty cute, I think, right there. And then I want to balance that arrangement on the bottom with something fun and festive. So here's two more stickers from that sheet, and I did the same thing, adding them to printer paper and cutting them back out. This one is going to have a portion of it inside the frame, so I added additional foam to that. And then this one has very thin, those scrapbook adhesive tabs, so it's a little bit of depth, but not too much. And I'm just gonna offset this one a little bit lower and to the right so that it has a more of an organic and not quite so lined up appearance. So here is my second card, and this one turned out really cute. It is actually a little bit more dimensional than my first card, but I think it worked out really well to have that frame. Okay, we're moving on now to card number 3, and I just wanted to mention really quickly that I used the same paper on all the insides of these cards because they all match the collection, and it was just easier to cut them all from one sheet, and then they all had the same little portion for a sentiment to be added, and that helped my preparation go a little bit faster. And so for this card, I'm going to be adding this very sweet orangey. It's very vintage. I used this quite a lot last year, and I like that it isn't quite so contrasty and bright as a lot of just regular orange cardstock. And this one's going to get a generous size border, and I usually leave mine at 1/16 of an inch, and then but for this one I wanted to use a rectangle die cut that had a little stitching detail, and this is the size that fit. I think that frame looks pretty nice, and this pattern is actually on the back of one of the cut aparts. I typically try to reserve the cut aparts to use as focal images, but this one was going to be too large. And so I didn't mind sacrificing that to get this pattern for my card. I put these up on the foam spacers as well so that I can get some dimension. And this is just going to be centered. And I really like that spider web on that pretty vintagey orange color. And so there is a secondary pattern for my layering here. And I just clipped this strip with the bottom of that die so that it would retain that stitched detail for each of the layers. And so here is some grass I'm including in my scene, and this is just die cut with a slimline die, and then I cut it again with that same rectangle. So remember, we're keeping our stitched border all the way around. And I'm going to bring in this circle. Does this look familiar? This is what I cut out of the middle of card 2 to create that frame. But this is going to act as a plaid moon. Is that a thing? Yep, I think it's a thing. And then I've got one more little layer of grass here. There was not enough space on the end for any adhesive tape, so I'm just going to add a little bit to this side, but I was able to work it in over here, and then I'll just go ahead and secure this right on the bottom. It's nice to stack up die cuts because you know they're going to all line up perfectly. Okay, these are my focal images, and they came from the same cut apart 3x4 size. I just clipped out the sentiment with a arched banner. I know that part of that hat is on there, and I know that part of the hat is off of here, but it will not be noticeable when you get them layered up. And so I just fussy cut this little witch from the background, leaving a border of the white showing so that it would look like an actual piece of ephemera instead of just something I cut out. And so I'm going to put my sentiment banner here. And then the witch has the spacers, so here is where I'll get my dimension. And I'm going to overlap that, and I definitely will not miss the top of that hat on the white background. So that was one way to get two different elements from the same cut apart. And so that is all for my third card, just a little cute scene with a witch in front of a plaid moon, having herself a little go at trick-or-treating. Okay, so we're on to card 4 now, and this is still going to be the A2 size, but I just switched from a portrait to a landscape orientation, and I'm going to add this cardstock with a cardstock border. Is that confusing? No, it's okay. I put silver around the black, and I'm actually going to be leaving part of this cardstock uncovered, and I know y'all would be proud of me. I don't believe I would have been able to do that last year, so that shows real progress. Here is a border strip that I'm adding to the bottom, and it is just going to fit right in between where that silver cardstock border is. And so I need to add a place for my focal images to land. I cut a large circle from just plain white cardstock, and that's going in the background. And then here is what was left after cutting the other circle for our first card. This is a much narrower kind of frame, more of a border really. So I'm just going to add my Tombow here. No one that follows my channel should ever be surprised that I am layering plaids, because I think that works just perfectly. Okay, now that we've got that on, here is a very large sentiment. This is just fussy cut from one of those cut aparts. That's the 3x4 size, and then I have popped that up on a foam spacer, putting that right here. And I've brought in one of those cone flowers. Remember a couple weeks ago, I picked up these dies. I don't know where the sheet went that was in here, but anyway, if it's still out of stock everywhere else, you can find that at the Frank Garcia studio. That's where I bought mine. And so I've been having fun making different combinations, and I wanted to see if I could do a flower that was kind of more holiday inspired, Halloweeny, if you will. And so I took different layers here from darkest to lightest. This is actually some offcuts of graphic 45 paper, and so it's kind of the same pinky orange tone but in different depths. So darkest to lightest, and then I did add a fair bit of inking with the spiced marmalade distress ink. And I also sort of inked my hand, but I may have got that off. Anyway, I put the cone part of the flower here. It has a gold layer underneath, so that just kind of shows through. And then I added stickles to all of the ends of these petals and just around here to give that a little accent as well. I'm going to put that here on the side. And I want to include another of these glittery stars, but I want to see where my flower falls first because I want to position this just kind of coming out from behind there. And I'll add my cone flower. Really love this flower die. I will be planning a tutorial for this when I get through with the series, so I won't be too much longer and we'll be able to make these together. But once you've got all of your layers popped up, it is so pretty and dimensional. Okay, so that's all for card 4, and I'll just bring in the other cards here as well. Now that's it also for day 7 of our 13 Days of Halloween series. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure you come back tomorrow for day 8. Now the question of the day is, if you are going to document this holiday, would you make a traditional scrapbook, a mini album, or a traveler's notebook. And I'm going to answer traveler's notebook for that. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Don't forget to leave me some love for this project and a big thumbs up. And if you're not already, I would love for you to subscribe. You can find links for all our social media sites in the description below. And as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.